So we have been in the process of, exploring, this relationship or this thing that we call fear. And most say, no, thank you. They literally say, no, thank you. I do not need to listen to this. And what I really, you can sit here and I can talk about stuff that's absolutely not applicable to your life. That's amazing. That you can say, this doesn't apply to my life. This is not how I feel. This is not what's going on with me. But always have the willingness to receive the message and to be able to confront in yourself, so that all of this planet is cyclical. So if this when this comes across your path, that you have the awareness to look at it, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, and without it having to impact your life because you know about it. But if you refuse and you say that's not for me, that makes you cynical and skeptical. And when you have cynicism, you actually refuse to accept that there's any value for it in for you. That, no thanks. And it's a good thing to be able to say no thanks these days. Please don't get me wrong. But do so with the proper discernment. And if we do a review, just because some of you are regulars, if you do a review and you use your own life as an example, how much you gain from investing and from your willingness to actually, explore this thing, these shadow things that lurks in our consciousness. Because that's mostly, I can't sit here and talk to you about things that work, because if they work, they really don't need to be explored. They just need to be enjoyed. But we need to sit with daily awareness that when you invest in your consciousness like this, to come sit on a Sunday morning and to actually enrich your life with awareness, so that you have your daily consciousness attuned to deal with ever demanding realities. And conditions are continually and consistently narrowing. There isn't that sense of space anymore where you can just go and play in the fields of life as you want to. Literally, the borders are closed. That means, although we're not experiencing as such, but it's a confinement that is placed on us, and this confinement doesn't even make exceptions for urgencies. It doesn't even make exceptions for death of a parent or a spouse, or to go and see an old person like a granny that's dying in hospital. Sorry, there's just no exceptions are made for these things. Conditions are continually and consistently narrowing. The space shrinks due to the numbers on the earth. As the numbers on the earth increase, the space that we have to occupy in order to, in the past, how we expanded our consciousness and our experience and our knowledge, that space is shrinking. It doesn't feel that way because we have the screen to look at. But if you look at the physical context of the space, it's shrunk immensely. And the paradox is that you still have this, like your angel showed you. The paradox is that you still have the globe in your hand. And with that comes a tremendous amount of pressure. So I would like to discuss with you another great limitation that we have in our lives. And even I that said, I don't think I've got that. I saw how much I still have of that in my life this past week. And perhaps this is even the biggest limitation that we have, all of us, that fear delivers us to. It's perfection. Perfection causes stress, immense stress. How will I get this to be perfect? How will I be perfect? How will I have the perfect wedding? How will I have the perfect job? How will I have the perfect spouse? How will I have the perfect home? Someone said to me the other day, oh, you know what? If this doesn't work, I just go get another degree. Become more perfect. Perfection is a great source of fear. And perfection is truly the driver, the thing that instills cynicism and skepticism. With perfection, your need for perfection teaches you to become very cynical and very skeptical. Why? Because you can never find perfection anyway. It always eludes you. And you haven't yet been able to find it in anything. Because the minute we think something is perfect, the minute we have this idea that now I found something that's truly perfect, it comes and shows itself up as fallible, as disappointing. But when you see how your cynicism and skepticism ultimately is driven by your fear of being wrong, then you will see what a huge element of rightness is attached to perfection. Because you've got to get it right. If you get it right, then it's going to be perfect. And that's what the system of education instills in us from the very first time that we enter into a school system. That we've got to get it right. And because of this immense fear of having to get things perfect, the only way that you then can preserve yourself, or so you reason. Reason is our greatest tool, but it's also our greatest downfall when you start becoming reasonable about things. Because that's a rightness based trait. I'm reasonable and I'm right. So with this driven by this immense fear of being wrong, because please, nobody must ever see that I was wrong about anything. I'm talking about myself. But that fear of being wrong with anything, of not showing up that you didn't know it, that you didn't know it all, that you wasn't all knowing, then boredom sets in. And instead of now going into this fear of being wrong, because you now have some awareness and you're tuning it here and there, you then go into boredom. Understand? So when you go into boredom, for me, what I think boredom is the real fear of failure. Because for as long as you can be bored, you don't have to do anything. So your fear of failure is sorted. But you're not going to get it wrong. You'd rather be bored. Because bored people don't do much. They don't engage with much. They're too bored. And for as long as they are bored, they have a very legit excuse. Because the fear of failure is great. But that's not being admitted. Just the fact that I'm bored. And you know, the need for perfection is a very strange thing. And let me just see what I've done with those notes now. Oh, you know, let me see where it is. Okay, Spirit doesn't want me to share those notes today. So I'll just keep to this. I will start here. Perfectionists are motivated not by a desire to do their best, but by a sense of compulsion, of guilt and fear. A perfectionist is driven by the fear of failure, a fear of not measuring up, and a compulsive need to avoid mistakes. Despite outstanding abilities and accomplishments, the perfectionist is never really happy, never really free of an internal driven need to be perfect and to be in control. Excuse me, I'm going to have to just stand up a bit. My circulation is not allowing me to continue sitting down. So a perfectionist is driven by a fear of failure, by a fear of not measuring up. What if I can't do this? What if I'm going to make a fool of myself? What if people think I'm stupid? What if I don't measure up? And a perfectionist is never really happy, never really free of this internal driven need to be perfect and in control. Because the perfectionist must be in control to ensure that everything will be perfect. Perfectionism enslaves the individual to uselessly impossible standards because they become uselessly impossible because you can't really do anything with it. It's energy that you're pumping into the system and into the situation that exacerbates probably what you don't want. So I feel like any activity, just look at yourself. When you feel like any activity isn't productive, if it isn't productive, so in other words, you're not going to engage yourself in things that doesn't make you feel like this is going to be, you know, a result that's going to be of significance. When you feel that any activity isn't productive, then it's a failure or a complete waste of time. So a perfectionist is always under tremendous pressure to make time count for accomplishment. So doing anything for fun is difficult. And if not for some, even impossible. For some people, it becomes totally impossible to have fun. because they really believe that when they're having fun, that something bad is going to befall them. And it's having fun becomes some kind of bad luck. Watching TV, for instance, must be educational and not merely just entertaining. You've got to look at stuff that's going to entertain you and give you something. Time in the pool must be spent swimming laps. Books must be read for professional development. And driving time must be spent dictating letters or working via your phone, sending voice notes or listening to an audio book or something. Is something pleasurable? Truly pleasurable? Then it's a waste of time. No, it's not for me. Can't be bothered with that stuff. And slowly the body even switches off from feeling any pleasure. It doesn't allow the sensation of pleasure because it's a waste of perfect time. Because of the cynicism and the skepticism that has now become so great. Look how it extends and how it like a tsunami, how the waves just wash over and wash over. I mean, can you think of a more appropriate formula for perpetual misery? Every little mistake or every little thing that goes wrong. Because remember, that starts with the fear of being wrong. So every little mistake or flaw is blown out of proportion, magnified. A molehill into Everest. Because a healthy person, when you are really integrated and you have finally overcome the need for perfection, then you can acknowledge a mistake or a weakness or something, a limitation, something that you're not good at, something that you know that you tend to do to yourself. You can admit it. You can confess them. You can admit, you can accept them, and gladly turns to whatever life offers next. That's the adventure. The perfectionist, however, puts the smallest defect under the microscope. Analysis paralysis. Making it much bigger than the facts warrant. It's really, really not necessary to go off on this kind of tangent. And mentally replays, then comes all the mind by association, mentally replays situations, conversations, or experiences over and over and over in the mind, unable to forget or let go of them. Because it was that little thing that just was so bad. And please, I'm not sitting here in judgment of you, because I teach best what I need to learn most. And I see it in my own life and how quickly I ascribed this label or this energy or this what I think is a faith of perfection, that I projected that onto someone this past week. I am often filled with doubt about what to do because I'm afraid that I'll make the wrong decision. I must do the right thing. What am I going to do? I must make sure that I do the right thing. A perfectionist frequently finds it difficult to make a choice because perfect alternatives do not present themselves. So, I cannot make this choice, but there's nothing else I can do either because there's not a perfect alternative that presents itself to me. So that puts me into a state of complete confusion. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Because a perfect alternative does not present. I cannot find one. And very often that creates a sense of immobilized, feeling totally immobilized, fearful that an action or a choice, or let's rather say a decision, can lead to a wrong result. And that it won't lead to the right result. And putting the worst possible anticipation and construction on everything, because that's the process: context, conduct, construct. And the worst possible construction is projected onto everything, and the anticipation is terrible things to overcome me. Yes, we're living in times where there are terrible things to come, because that's the process that we're in. And that's why we're preparing ourselves here. The perfectionist will gloomily predict the future in advance of most attempts to achieve its objectives. No, I can't do this. That's not going to work. No, I can't do this. Look at the skepticism. Look at the cynicism. Within this environment, in the life conditions that presents so many challenges, within that, we have to overcome this so that we can free ourselves from the cycle. I continually find fault with myself, and I question and doubt my performance or accomplishments, even when others tell me that I've done well. I continually find fault with myself, and I question and doubt my performance or my accomplishments, even when others tell me that I've done well. The perfectionist rarely cuts himself or herself any slack, but instead determines that any performance is lacking somehow. Any performance is lacking somehow, and never good enough to warrant feelings of satisfaction. Can you now see why at the start of the session I asked you to remember something in your week that made you feel so good, so that you can actually allow yourself and teach yourself to feel the satisfaction, to allow yourself to feel the satisfaction of living a good life, often beyond the need for perfection. That the perfectionist really cuts himself and any slack. It's always, the performance is always lacking somehow. Somehow I could have, should have, would have. Never good enough to warrant feelings of satisfaction. And they will always remind themselves, always, that they could have, should have, and would have done better. And somehow in that space, in that mindset, there is no first place. Because somehow you always come in second. No matter how much you put in, how successful your efforts, the perfectionist self-esteem is frequently incongruent with the feedback received from others. Incongruent means that it's not true. It doesn't align. Somewhere the truth is not aligning here, because something is, there's a limitation that allows this alignment to take place. In other words, if you look at it, you may receive compliments, praise, recognition, but the internal monologue, the self-devaluing, negative and critical inner monologue, just won't allow it because it's not perfect. And most of the time, this is not stuff that you share. This is stuff that people know about you. This is internal monologue. And just incidentally, a perfectionist never lets anyone else, lets any other people off the hook either. Because just somehow, it's never enough. Doesn't, you know, if you got a B on your report, your parent would say, well, why didn't you get an A? If it's 79%, why didn't you get 80? It's just constantly our system. You know, I spoke to a parent this week about the context in which, yes, and because they said to me, but how am I supposed to motivate my child? I said, but find the appropriate moment to share it, not while you discussing marks or while you're holding the report in your hand. Choose another opportunity, make a game out of it and say, let's play a game. Let's say if you can, this term, if you can actually challenge yourself to go 1% higher. It's, you know, and explain it in a different way, but not you can do better. Why? There was a lot of work that went into that mark. And let me tell you, these things are not said aloud, but it's frequently critical, judgmental, and intolerant appraisals of others in self-talk. In our own self-talk, how we talk about and how we appraise and how we think of others. Remember we spoke last week about the mirrors. My parents were critical, overly demanding, and expected too much of me. Often perfectionists do have overcritical parents. True. Parents who expect more of them than that what they can deliver even. And that type of parenting also becomes internalized so that the perfectionist's own self-talk takes over. And the task of demanding, criticizing, and expecting becomes their own. They've taken that over from the parent. Because even though we don't like to think so, and especially in modern society, they don't like to think so, but we like to continue in traditions. We love it. If something doesn't go exactly as planned, I get upset and consider the event a failure. Because perfectionists are often masters of dichotomous thinking. Dichotomous thinking. It's a dichotomy. It's a disaster. It's a train smash. It's finished. It's done. It's now over. And please, I'm including myself in that. I can very much think in in a dichotomous manner about, you know, thinking that very easily, very easily. It's like a misbelief maker, you know, misbelief maker. So I make sure that I take away all my, or misfaith. I don't even like the word believer, but misfaith. Disfaithing the situation. Black and white, right or wrong, success or failure, good or bad. Dichotomous thinking forces everything into two categories, good or bad. And, you know, when I just make that little shift and I say, you know, how can I get this to work for me? Not, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working. Okay, so it's not working. How can I get this to work for me? Not the perfectionist, you know, that dichotomous thinking forces everything into duality, into two categories, into like or dislike. Decisions, events, relationships, it either occupies one of the two positions. And the bigger picture is lost because the perfectionist sees realities in opposing dyads. It always has to go into opposing energy, this against that. And in between these two, we have all the stale and stagnant energy that can do nothing because it's trapped between these two poles. It's trapped in here. That's the self-imposed limitations. That's the feeling of I'm stuck. It's all or nothing. It's wonderful or awful. It's full or empty, and so forth. And when the sort of thinking is applied to the perfectionist's performance, so then you have to either see the outcome as perfect, you know, which is rarely, and I'm sure there has been moments where you can say this was perfect. Because we're meant to live in heaven. We're meant to be in paradise. And when we have that feeling of we are in heaven, then everything feels blissful. That state of ecstasy is a state of blissful, absolutely everything is provided. So then when you're forced to see the outcome, you know, as perfect, then everything will feel like a failure. Because the perfect thing can't deliver. And since few outcomes are utterly flawless in life, even when you do something well, even when you're really excelling and it's fantastic, you still look at it as a failure. I must do everything well. I must do everything well in order to feel good about myself. I must do everything perfect in order to feel good about myself. Listen to the difference. Whatever the task, even if it's not intrinsically important, the perfectionist is compelled to get it right. And he feels compelled to force such stringent restrictions and have-tos. Because if I can't even just run a quick errand to the shop, I have to have my nails perfect, my hair must be perfect, my face must be perfect. And therefore, you find that a perfectionist very often procrastinates. Procrastinates because everything has to first be in place before they can get started, before they can work efficiently. And then what happens is that you end up working ineffectively whilst you're getting everything organized, because now you're so You're so thinly stressed. You think you're multitasking, but you're actually getting nothing done. That's the proverbial shifting of papers all over your desk. And at the end of the day, it feels like you were standing in one place, spinning your legs because nothing really got done. It consumes great amounts of time trying to do something perfectly, whatever the task may be. Because the perfectionist believes that any effort less than perfect, and I'm not talking here about giving your best or doing your 100%. I'm talking about the need for perfection. Because the perfectionist believes that any effort less than perfect will make him or her look like silly or incompetent or inadequate. So don't be disheartened if you think you qualify as a perfectionist. Just become aware that that's what you do so that you can change it. Because why is it necessary to change your relationship with perfection? Because perfection doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Perfection, the need for perfection stops things. It prevents things. It limits things. It steals things from your life. Literally, it steals it away without you realizing it. It steals your potential. It steals your opportunities. It steals your inner peace. It steals your ability to accept and to use the skills that you have at your disposal. But perfection stops your participation. It stops, it shuts down your potential. Your need for perfectionism is a trap. It poisons your vision. You can't see anymore. Perfection becomes such a comfort zone that you can no longer risk. You cannot risk. Perfection drives you into becoming pretentious. Why pretentious? Because you have to pretend in order to keep up the need and the facade of perfection. Look at me, I'm perfect. And if you don't feel like you're perfect, then it will actually shut down your potential, because then you'll constantly see your life and you'll experience your life as doors locking in front of your face. That you're not perfect enough to enter. So, non-acceptance of anything always gives us fear. And one of the greatest limitations we place on ourselves is non-acceptance. Non-acceptance. A refusal to accept. And when that happens, when this non-acceptance, because this non-acceptance is synonymous with your need for perfection. In the need for perfection, there will continuously be a non-acceptance online, which will forebode any form of joy or bliss or happiness or elation. It's foreboding. Because, you know, happy people cannot be controlled. And if you are, as the perfectionist, in your need to control, you must know that when somebody is really happy, they can't be controlled. You can't control yourself if you're really happy. You know? Unhappy people are normally struggling people. And they want to give up. And life is predisposed to unhappiness and a system of suffering. And on this suffering, because the suffering feeds on itself. The more suffering is, the more suffering grows. So we need to declare just simply that we can accept today. Dispose of the non-acceptance, because the non-acceptance that drives the need for perfection. It always gives you an ultimatum. Non-acceptance always has an ultimatum. And it's that ultimatum that causes you so much suffering. When you are into perfection, you are such an ideal victim for prime manipulators. Because manipulators speak the language of perfection. They're going to offer you the sun, the moon, and the stars, and they promise perfection at every turn. They speak words that indicate perfection. And all the while, deceiving. And, you know, it's not that they necessarily lying to you, but, you know, there's the omission. It's just a very subtle omission. Lies by omission. And using your need for perfection against you like a weapon. Because your perfection becomes a cage. Your perfection becomes the cage of logic that you live in. You know, for Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, and strangely enough, I took the board away, yeah, it's behind me for all this time, and now the board's not here, now I want to use it today. So, if you look at Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, you know, he said that, you know, and he actually said that he had a symbol. And you'll see this symbol in his home at Buringen, and also where he resided. You see there's even a big concrete block, marble block, that he carved the symbol into himself with his own hands. And, you know, this is what the symbol looks like. I'm just drawing it here with my hand on a piece of paper so I can show you. This is the symbol. It's a square with a circle in the middle. And I sat down and I looked at the symbol and I wondered, why is this his most famous? Why is it for him the most ultimate symbol for him? Because there is ultimately only 3 symbols in the universe from which everything is created. And that's the triangle, the circle, and the square. Everything else is born out of those 3 symbols. It encompasses every single symbol in sacred geometry too. So If you look at your comfort zones, what is a comfort zone other than a box? You know, there's the circle in the front, and the square becomes a box, a cage. And logic becomes your logic, the way that your logic functions will be driven by the need for perfection. And the logic is the cage. And you know, it's a cage that is an energy container. It's an energy trapping device. That when you are when you're actually in this cage, in the box, that's why we say think out the box. When you're thinking in terms of the box, which is your logic, your need for perfection, that's an energy restricting and energy trapping way of living your life. Because perfection controls versus being the power, being the change. That's the source of truth and of lightness. Not rightness, lightness. But if you want to control, because perfection desperately needs to control. It cannot function unless it feels it's in control. It's a desperation for that to actually happen. It must have the ability to control. But if you look at your life and you look at the process of 100%, of getting to 100%, of what it means to step into your power, then you can see, but why do I need to chase after perfection when I can do myself and my life with excellence? With pure excellence. When you do something in excellence, it is not perfection, it is excellent. It's a cut above the rest. It's an energy that when someone is on the receiving end of excellence, that they feel so important, they feel so acknowledged, they feel so totally significant and adequate. It's an automatic exchange of energy when you are in excellence. So I want you to now look at, just for a few moments, just look in your life. Just in the last, let's use the month of October. How much did you hold yourself ransom for things to be perfect without even realizing that that's what you're doing? Because that's what I saw. I went, what? I never thought that that's where I was operating, but I was. And now that I have the ability to look at it, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, I can see how that entrapped me. So in the next few moments, listen as many times as you can remember that you were in perfection. Just recall it, remember it. And then take a look at what did you really want in a situation beyond your need for perfection. What was it that you actually wanted? What was the real dream? What was the real want? What was the real need, the real opportunity that was hidden by this cloak of perfection? If I look at it and I think, why did I have to have things perfect? Because it's not necessary to impress. The excellence and the standard with which I work is who I am. It's what I do all the time. It doesn't get switched on or off. Why did I have to Why did I have to do that to myself? So I want you to fantasize about having and receiving beyond what perfection has prevented from happening in your life. And in a big way, let it happen this instantaneously from this moment onwards, present tense. And you don't have to think about it. You have to know about it. That you can have love, that you can have your millions, that you can have acclaim, that you can have leadership, that you can command it, that you can claim it. Why? Because you're entitled to it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We always look at stuff and we actually, when we actually go and sit and we review stuff and we take it under the magnifying lens, the analysis paralysis stuff, the measurement that you use there and what you apply is normally perfection in retrospect, if you're honest. Of yourself and others and life. What are you really waiting to have happen in your life? That perfection has prevented you. Your need for perfection has prevented you. Some people are so, they've got such a huge investment in perfection that they will continuously choose to have relationships with people that appear physically perfect to them. And every time it ends up in a disaster. But they can't get themselves to have a relationship with someone of substance because their picture of perfection prevents them. What are you waiting to have happen in your life? Find work, success, own a house, pay off a house, making a difference, finding a soulmate, streamlining your shape, support, stability, consistent growth, financial freedom, energy, enthusiasm, popularity, claim it. But when you're going to ask for that, just take a look what it's going to ask of you in order to accommodate that in your life. If you're a person who likes your own space and who likes to do things your own way and who likes to have the freedom of coming and going as you please, if you're going to ask for a relationship in that context, it's going to be a problem. Because you're going to not have the space and time to do as you please. To just sleep when you feel like, or to just whatever. Look at that, because it's the picture of perfectionism that says, this is what I've got to have. Because when I have this, then my life will be complete. Then my life will be perfect. No, your life is complete now. Your life is complete now because the things that you're doing really, really suits you. And whether it's just a comfort zone or not, it matters not. It's working for you. It gives you a good life. Don't look for reasons why you've got to make wrong. What is already working? Because you have this misconception, this dichotomy in your thinking, in your logic that tells you it's not perfect. Why? Perfection doesn't exist. Because everything can always be better. Because everything's subject to growth. And growth means that it's going to become more than what it was before. That's what growth means. That's how it works on this planet. If you're not growing, you're dead. Huh? So now, relax. Make this today with perfect. You know, if you want to go and do a little ritual of perfect after this chat, feel free. Go sit in the garden and have a nice long chat with perfect. And tell perfect now, you know what? Thank you. You've served me. You've allowed me to get to this, but now I'm choosing excellence. And I'm choosing to see things in, because enthusiasm, when I become enthusiastic about what life has to offer me, what I can receive, and what I can give life, when I become excited about that again, that ignites enthusiasm. Enthusiasm ignites excellence. It's all that you need for excellence, is to be enthusiastic, to be enthusiastically willing about living this adventure called your life. The things that need to happen so that your life can be perfect, right, and happy, they don't. Because if it's meant for you, nothing is going to stop it. If that's your entitlement, nothing will prevent you from receiving it. But have you got the capacity? Have you got the capacity? Can you be relaxed? Can you live as if you are in a fairy tale where you can have all your wishes and that you can actually go big? Go big! You know, perfection doesn't deny you to go big, because it will tell you that it's impossible. Go big! Impossible spells impossible. Even write it down and sit down with perfection and you tell it. You tell it how ridiculous it's been. It's actually, how ridiculous it is that it's actually redirected you. You know, I always used to come home from a client that I worked for years in Parktown. And then I used to drive from there through the back. You know, I didn't go on the highway and that. I just drove through the back roads. And I always drove past a place called Shepston Gardens. And I always looked at it, you know, I am passionate about things that are built out of stone. Homes and homesteads and buildings made from stone, from the environment. That's why for years I worked at the Bastion in Irene, because it was also built out of the stone from the environment. It was completely built out of stone. And this place, Shepston Gardens, is completely constructed. All the buildings have been constructed out of stone. And this is also a place where Gandhi was purported to have had meetings when he was still in South Africa. That's how old the buildings are. And I always used to drive past Shepston Gardens and I used to think, this is my dream venue. It's my dream venue for my work. And I always used to say, no, you know, you're not perfect enough to be able to come to a place like this. And, you know, this is the place where people come. That's the perfect place. It's a magnificent venue. It's truly like a fairy tale inside there. And I had the opportunity to marry a couple there in the chapel. It was a beautiful, very, very beautiful event. And because I suspended the need. I suspended the need for it to be perfect, so that I must be perfect in order to. I just thought, you know what? If it's meant for me, it'll happen. And it was an amazing experience. It was a fairy tale. So I want you to choose what you want to zone in, what you want to, like a treasure hunt. Once you know where the treasure is, you can go for it. You know, you can zone in on it. It's the cross on the map. It's gonna be a beautiful wedding. So, if we have the fear to ask, I'm going to read you this little story. Because perfection always prevents you from asking. Because you think, what's the use of asking? It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect anyway. Because you know that perfection doesn't exist. So you don't bother to ask because you know that you're not going to get it. It's called Cadillac versus Volkswagen. And I'm reading it verbatim. Visualize exactly what you want and don't be afraid to ask for it. Is the headline. I can't remember where I heard the following little tale, but I've used it often in process work to illustrate that most people find it both amusing and useful. And I'm not sharing it in any context. It's not a perfect story. A man died and went to heaven. He was met at the gate and was escorted down the driveway when his companion apologized for the fact that there were piles of brand new material goods along the pathway. I'm sorry, he said, but we ran out of space to store all these things that we have ready for people, and then they just don't want them. See, cosmic kitchen. I can't imagine anyone refusing these wonderful things, the man said. Just look at that Cadillac over there. Why would anyone ever refuse that? Well, it's interesting that you should mention it, his escort replied. Because that was prepared for you. But I would never have refused that, the man said, astonished. Yeah, but in your prayers, you kept asking for a Volkswagen, the escort replied. So that's what we gave you. Don't let your picture of perfection prevent you from asking what you want. And if I go over the words that we were gifted with at the start, and I just read them in the order that we received them, with honesty, we purify ourselves into simplicity and peace, so that we have the strength and the inspiration to play. Because when you're playing, there's no place for perfection. In spontaneity, perfection doesn't exist. So with honesty, we purify ourselves into simplicity, so that we can have the peace to find the strength and inspiration to play. With flexibility and faith, we embrace the responsibility to live with the eyes of beauty, which gives us the willingness and the patience to live a good life and have a fabulous adventure. So thank you very much. That's my story for today. And thank you for your presence here this morning, which made it possible for me to play this little game with you.